welcome you all to today's lecture. In this video, we are going to discuss one of the most sought after concepts of English language, and that is understanding of tenses. Now, I'm sure when you looked at your knowledge of verbs, you mostly are not sure how to conjugate that with the knowledge of tense of a sentence. In this video, I'm going to simplify at least both present and past tense usage, so that whenever you're framing sentences or solving questions in most of your exams, you are sure to use at least these tense forms correctly and thereby enhance your clarity of the concept. So without much delay, let's jump into our knowledge of what really present and past tense are about. Now before that, I'm going to really question you as to how many of you are aware that what exactly tense denotes in a sentence, right? So if somebody asks you how to really understand tenses and where does the word come from, the first thing that you need to keep in mind is that the word tense comes from the Latin word tempus, which means time. So the first knowledge of tense of a sentence comes in correlation with the understanding of time of a sentence. Now remember, time can denote time of an activity or state of a subject. So the second thing you need to remember is the tense of a verb shows the time of an action or an event, sometimes completeness of an action or state in relation to the time of speaking. Please remember, you may not find activity in every sentence, but that does not mean there won't be an understanding of tense required to frame that sentence. Every sentence uses the concept of time whenever we are using finite verbs. Therefore, how am I supposed to proceed with my understanding of tenses without really dividing that big time capsule into three fragments? Which are the three fragments that we use to understand time capsule? You have the knowledge of present, past and future. In these three broad domains, you divide the tense into four individual forms. So now, rather than combining all of them together, let's deal with them one by one. We are going to proceed with the understanding of present tense first, and then slowly in this lecture I'm going to talk about how present and past work together so that you become sure about at least these two. And then slowly in the next lecture we are going to proceed with our understanding of future. So let's jump to the knowledge of present tense first. So how many tense forms exist in the present tense itself? Now it can be broadly divided into four tense forms. Firstly, you have simple present tense. Now simple present tense is also referred as present indefinite sometimes. Secondly, we have present continuous. Now present continuous is something which talks about progressive action. Thirdly, you have present perfect, which refers to ended action. And lastly, you have present perfect continuous tense. Now, in these respective forms, unless you are aware of each of their usages, you can't really be sure whether you're getting that tense right in your sentence or not. So, let's proceed with our understanding of the first form itself. How do we use simple present tense in our language? Now, the first thing you have to remember is in usage of present tense, I'm going to talk about simple present, and these are the keywords which will actually give you a little hint, a little clue in your sentence that can help you identify that the sentence belongs to a simple present category. For example, whenever you see often, usually, every day, always, never, seldom, first, then, sometimes, you notice there is a frequency of an action that is being talked about. So first thing I have to remember is where all am I supposed to use these words? Please notice that something that happens repeatedly is the first usage of simple present tense. Thereafter, you have how often something happens. That is also denoting simple present tense. And then one action follows another. So whenever I'm talking about an action right in front of my eyes, consecutive actions, actions that have been proceeding but in the very same time frame. Now you really can't jump to using simple present tense unless you're aware of the form of it, right? So when I look at the form of the verb or the tense usage, it says he, she, it or any other subject that the sentence has, combined with infinitive form plus S or ES. Now S or ES is only specifically mentioned for singular subject. We have covered this in our understanding of verbs. If it's a plural subject, I only use infinitive form. There is one more place where you can come across usage of simple present tense, and that is when a future action is already planned and arranged specifically for a fixed state or a plan or an arrangement. Now this does talk about future activity, but because it's a scheduled activity, it's already arranged, we are using simple present tense even in this. So you keep a note of how the form that is allowed in simple present tense is infinitive, the bare form, the very first form of the verb, and I'm only going to use S or ES depending upon singularity of the subject. Right? Now we can easily jump to how to use simple present tense in variety of sentences. Now firstly, remember that simple present tense as a form has the same form as the root form of the verb. Now the root form is the infinitive form. This we have established clearly. Secondly, look at the examples. Play, study, eat. You are not using to in front of them because then it becomes a to infinitive. That is not allowed. We are using the finite verb form without to, but just as the bare form of the verb. Now, S and ES are added for the third person singular pronoun usage. Remember, he, she, it, these are third person singular pronoun usage, and I'm going to add S or ES only when they are existing in the sentence. For example, he plays football, she likes reading. So wherever I come across third person singular, I'm going to add S or ES depending upon the verb form. Apart from this, you will also feel that simple present tense has to have another most common general usage, and where exactly that does happen? That happens whenever I am actually expressing a habitual action, a universal truth, or a narration. Now habitual action, universal truth, narration are the most common usages. Why? So whenever you have an example such as the sun rises in the east or the sun sets in the west, this is a universal truth, so you're going to stick with simple present tense. Similarly, he goes for jogging every day in the morning. Again, simple present tense because it's a habitual action. So whenever you come across this usage, make sure you use simple present tense. Thereafter, you will also notice that it is also used when a sentence is exclamatory. Exclamatory actions are easy to identify, such as there she goes. Look, here comes the train. These are spontaneous actions, and therefore the verb form is simple present tense in usage. Then we have the next usage. It is also used to depict a future activity that is already planned and scheduled for a specific time or date. Now I did mention this when I was introducing the form. So you remember that if it's a planned or a scheduled action, stick to simple present tense. For example, the next train is at 10 a.m. It's a scheduled activity. It's a calendar activity. So your clue should be any action laid out on a timetable or calendar. Even if it's a future scheduled action, we are going to use simple present tense. Similarly, the telecast is at 9 p.m. Everywhere we are using simple present tense because of this part of the action, planned and scheduled action, right? Now, it is used to present live commentary of a sporting event. For example, the batsman strikes the ball with full force. The footballer scores third goal in the match. Everywhere I am representing spontaneous live commentary, thus I am using simple present tense. It is used to introduce quotations with the verb say. Whenever you're quoting someone using the verb say, stick to simple present tense, such as Wordsworth says, nature never did betray the heart that loved her. Notice, it's a quotation that is being highlighted, and therefore the verb that we use is in simple present tense. Next we have, it is also used for time clauses and conditional clauses in place of simple future. Whenever I have an activity in form of a time clause, half of it will be simple future, but the remaining will be simple present tense, such as if you do not study, you will not pass the exam. This part is future, but this part of the condition carries simple present tense. Similarly, whenever the boss arrives, you will be informed. If I notice the construction of the sentence, both if and whenever are conditions, and therefore the structure of the sentence carries simple present tense. These are tiny clues that will actually help you remember the usage of simple present tense. Next, we have the usage of present continuous. Words such as look, listen, now, at the moment give me clue to identify whether I should use present continuous or not. What exactly are the usages? Something is happening at the same time of speaking or sometime around it. What is the form that we use? We use the be form, either is, am or are, plus our infinitive coupled with ing. This becomes the present participle form. Remember, so infinitive plus ing together becomes present participle, and thus I can use this as my present continuous verb form. Now, I have to remember that the first usage of present continuous is to denote an action happening at the same time of speaking, the simultaneous occurrence. For example, the actors are performing on stage, she is teaching in class. These are happening at the time of speaking. But what if it has been ongoing, may not happen right in front of my eyes? What does that look like? For example, it denotes an action that is not happening at the same time of speaking but is in progress. You are aware of the progressive nature of the action, and that's why continuous form is also known as progressive form. For example, she is working as an NGO volunteer. Now, there is no defined timeline here. I am not doing this at the time of speaking, but it's in progress, and therefore we use present continuous. Similarly, I am reading Harry Potter these days. I'm reading Harry Potter series, right? So because it's a progressive action, has been ongoing, the tense form that we use is present continuous. Next we have, it is used for persistent habits and things that constantly happen. Notice, habitual actions are converted into persistent habits, things that you are normally found doing constantly or always. For example, he is always complaining about his boss. The moment I add this part, it becomes present continuous. Similarly, she is always carrying her favorite toy around. Again, it's a habit, it's a tendency that you find persistently in a person, and therefore you're using present continuous. Next we have present perfect. What are the clue words? Just yet, never, recently, already, for, since, so far. These words point out that the action has ended. Now I know you will wonder, if it has ended, why is it not past tense? Why is it present tense? The reason why we call it present perfect is because when something has ended in recent past and bears a connection to the present, then it becomes present perfect and not past. What is the form that we use? We use has or have with our subject plus past participle. Remember, has for singular, have for plural, and past participle is your third form of the verb. This third form is what you are going to use in every present perfect structure, right? Now, I have the first usage of present perfect tense, such as it shows the relationship of time between a past activity and a present activity. So you can't say that it has no connection with present. That's why we are calling it present perfect. For example, I have eaten breakfast, so I can leave for office. Because the first one has ended, I can do the second one. Therefore, it's called present perfect. Similarly, they have finished their homework, so they can go for swimming. First action has ended, thus the second one can begin. Secondly, it expresses recently completed activities. For example, she has just completed her art project. Look at the usage of just here. This points out that it's a recently completed action, and that's why we are using has plus the third form. Similarly, he has just left home. These are your tiny clues that prompt to you that use this tense form if you want to get that sentence right. Next we have, it is also used to inquire past activities whose time is not definite. If there is no specific mention of the time of action, we can use present perfect. For example, have you heard John Lennon? I'm not mentioning which time frame I'm asking about. Have you met him before? Again, no specific mention of time, but both the times we use which form of the verb? We use present perfect. Similarly, it also denotes past events whose effects still exist, the impact still persists, such as the boss has left the meeting and we can now discuss the proposal. Because he has left, we can now discuss the proposal, which means the impact of him leaving still exists. Similarly, he has eaten all the fruits, so there are no more left. Because this has ended, you have an impact bearing on the present action. Thus, we are using present perfect. I hope the explanation makes it clear cut for you to remember when all you are using this tense form. And now we can easily notice the next usage. It is also used to depict actions that began in past, are still running and might continue even in future, but it's not really decided or prompted in the sentence. For example, she has always considered him to be his inspiration. This has always been there. You are not prompting from which starting point, and therefore we are using has plus V3. Similarly, they have lived here for 8 years. They have done this activity for a long enough time, might continue to live even in future, but it's not pointed out, and thus we are using present perfect and not present perfect continuous, right? Now I have the last form. Present perfect continuous can be noticed with words like all day, for, since, the whole day, how long, because they talk about progressive nature of action. So continuous here is the progressive action. Where all we use it? Action began in past and has just stopped. How long the action has been happening is also emphasized, and the form we use is has, have, as per our subject, plus been plus the infinitive plus ing form. So infinitive plus ing is again present participle, has for singular, have for plural. But there's one more thing that you need to remember here. The emphasis is on extent of the time of and activity. So if I'm not laying emphasis on the extent of time, I can't use this tense form. If I am using been plus ing, I have to focus on the length of action. The first usage that you remember is it expresses an action that began earlier and is still continuing. You will have a clue. Clues such as for, since. For example, she has been studying for 2 hours. They have been living here since 1980. Notice, for is specifying duration, since is specifying point of time. Similarly, it also denotes activities that have already been completed but whose effects are still continuing. For example, he has been working all day to complete his project and is exhausted now. Because this activity had been going on entire day. Therefore, the impact is the next activity. So if you notice, present perfect continuous tells you correlation of time with other actions. So if I combine all present forms together, all 4 forms, it makes it very easy for us to remember those tiny clues that will tell us themselves that yes, I'm supposed to use this tense form. So if this is clear now, we can easily jump to our understanding of past tense. Now past tense becomes fairly simple once I have a strong command on my present tense usage, and then together we are going to apply them in various forms of questions. So let's proceed to our next segment where we look at past tense and its usages.